Welcome to Trine Days Roundtable 25, update from Dallas, JFK, and the long arc of history. I am Bruce Taurus, moderating. At the JFK Assassination 60 Years Later conference in Dallas 2 weeks ago, publisher Kris Millegan presented Swirling Milieus, and authors Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould presented The Deep Answers to JFK's Assassination Are Hidden in the Mystical, or Fitzgerald's Revelation. They will tell us how it all went, and then we'll have questions and answers with everyone. So first, our host, who has published about 180 books that challenge official history, Kris Millegan.
Well, howdy do, folks. And, again, I want to thank you for your time because, as somebody said something one time, we don't get it back. We get to go through it and do what we have to do. And it was a very nice meeting in Dallas. It was, we had the last really big meeting in Dallas was in 2019, and then we had something going on in the world. And it was nice to see there was people that were new to looking into this. And there was some young kids there, which was very nice to see. And my presentation, Swirling Milieus, basically, asked the question, who done it? And, people say the CIA, the mob, the deep state, Secret Service, whoever. There's a long list. And basically I said, well, pretty much all of them were involved. It was really much like the Caesar assassination. You had to have a bunch of bloody knives. And if you didn't have a bloody knife, you could get attacked for the act. So it was and then, the other thing that I caused a little consternation because people asked me, well, when did the planning start? Well, part of the motivation goes back quite a ways with the Fitzgeralds, but the basic planning of the act started in the 1930s when they're getting the killing field ready there in Dallas. And the same thing when you look at 9/11, the basic plannings for that start in the 1930s. Okay. Now, I want to start off today with a speech or excerpts of a speech by Senator John F. Kennedy. This is when he was running for president. This is from September 5th in 1960. I am taking my case to the American people because that is where it belongs, because that is where there will be no threat of veto or parliamentary obstruction, and because that is where we can always place our confidence. I take our case to you because I'm confident that the American people want an enduring peace in which human dignity, truth, and justice under law are secured for all men everywhere. I take our case to you because I'm confident that you are willing to do whatever has to be done to make us first in the world militarily and then first in the fight for peace. I take our case to you because I'm confident that all of us here as descendants of immigrants are ready to renew our hospitality to the homeless, the tired, and the poor from other lands without discrimination as to national origin. I take our case to you because I'm confident that as citizens of one world, we are willing to share our plenty with our brothers in the new states of Asia and Africa, and with those in Europe and Latin America who need our help and our friendship. I take my case to you because I'm confident that the American people are not going to tolerate pockets of poverty and chronic unemployment in this land and the waste of idle men and women who are ready, willing, and able to work, or the decline of our farms. I take my case to you because I know you agree with me that racial discrimination must be eliminated everywhere in our society, in jobs, in housing, in voting, in lunch counters, and in schools. In 1776, there were those who said that national independence was an idle dream. In 1789, there were those who said that a sovereign union of equal states was an idle dream. In 1860, there were those who said that freeing the slaves was an idle dream. In 1932, there were those who said that a New Deal for the American people was an idle dream. Now, in 1960, we face problems unlike any we've faced before. Never has a challenge been so great. Never have the stakes been so large. Never have the dreams and the ideals and dedication of free men been so essential. We have no time for complacency, timidity, or doubt. This is a time for courage and action. This is a time for strong leaders, leaders who are not afraid of new frontiers, leaders who are not afraid of the facts, leaders who can turn our dreams into reality. Give me your mandate. Give us the men, for I believe the job can be done. During the dark days of World War II, Winston Churchill appealed to America for help, pleading, give us the tools and we will finish the job. Today, in 1960, when America faces challenges and perils greater than ever before, I say to all Americans who want to build a better America, give us the job, for we have the tools. Again, by Senator John F. Kennedy before his election to president. Amen.
Thank you, Kris.
Thank you, Kris.
Now, Paul and Liz.
Okay, well, I think we, as everyone here knows, we've been on a very lengthy journey. This journey actually started, the one that landed in Dallas, actually started with Alyssa, our daughter's dream, in 1991, when Paul's father arrived and he brought a messenger with him that we had no idea who he was, but Paul knew instantly he had to dig into the family history and go back and find out about the Fitzgerald family. And 3 months later, we see the film JFK in 1991, December. We go to Oliver Stone with that document that we had put together. And one of the things that was so amazing was to actually come full circle at Dallas. And we discovered that the actual framework that we gave Oliver in 1991 is pretty much the outline that we actually filled in, though, the missing pieces. And if you look at the two, you can see structurally it's the outline. It doesn't have the actual story yet. What you have is all the structures that we had to figure out that needed to be there. So that, I think, is part of what, we're trying to help all of you grasp the process that we've been in, and why I think what Kris just read us about JFK and the mission that he seemed to instinctively know was his mission from the minute he stepped onto the public stage. He knew, and we are convinced that he got that clarity of that mission from the Fitzgerald legacy. All right. I mean, one of the stories that we heard a while ago was that JFK actually had conversations with many leaders around the world in the third world, and he was absolutely constantly promoting that colonialism has to be over, that we have to help people develop their own economies, all the things that we've heard about, but we know still hasn't happened yet the way it needs to. And we were told by someone that he had a conversation with Nehru and brought up the fact that he did understand about colonialism, even, I know, obviously as a Caucasian man, clearly coming from a very wealthy family at that point, but he actually lived through his family for over 400 years under the thumb of the British Empire. So he felt he did understand, and he did have that. And that legacy is what we're talking about. And it's connected to the realization that he must have had about really bringing these ideas and getting people to open up to the reality and the power of these ideas. And obviously the willingness to take on a state that did not want those ideas put forward. By the way, the speech will be in the chat box, the location where you can actually get it. So when you begin to look at the actual history of what really happened to the Fitzgeralds, leading to the complete annihilation of the Fitzgeralds by 1583, and the implications of that and what that meant and how these ideas have moved forward, I think all of these efforts that we have to try to create, and remember our big secret here is, as we know from our wonderful friend Alana Hartzog, is that we first have to create the economy of peace, and then we can create world peace. But getting people to open up to the very unique way that JFK really came into our lives, and recognizing that by being able to connect to this part of who he was, we really do have the power to bring forth what he was trying to do for us, but we really have to come together to do it. Now, Paul is going to give you his impressions. He was the one who actually delivered the speech as the Fitzgerald.
Well, I was very taken by actually going to Dealey Plaza. I had no idea, as Kris mentioned earlier, that that the area was so small, that it was a very controlled site, that the way in which the motorcade went through Dealey Plaza was completely devoid of any security idea. There's no way you could have protected the president under those circumstances. And that's what struck me even before I got there, was the fact that that was the message. It just reminded me of the message that I got that day in 1963, when I was 12 years old, that just reminded me of the fact that if they can kill the president of the United States in broad daylight on a city street in America, what chance do we, and then get away with it? What chance do any of us have in order of when the guns are turned on us? What chance do we really have in a democracy? What freedom do we really have with that kind of threat hanging over our heads? So that really struck me at the time, but actually seeing it in person just really was, it was so dreadful. I mean, it's just a dreadful place. And it was clearly, some kind of ritual sacrifice. And we had this instinct about it. I had an instinct about it from a long time ago, that there was something else having to do with the assassination of JFK that was bigger than just the moment of the time he was living in. There were a lot of things that were happening in the United States in 1963. He represented an enormous change in terms of what the leadership of this country had been from World War I through World War II and the creation of the Cold War. But it really was a question of why was it so difficult for this institution known as the United States to move into a new area and to look at the world from a different perspective and address the world from a different perspective, rather than dropping nuclear weapons on those you disagree with and you come to blows with. So seeing it in person like that, really, and standing on the grassy knoll and looking at the proximity of it. I mean, if you could have hit him with a BB gun. That's how close the place was. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable to me. So it really, and it's still with me 2 weeks later. I'm still feeling the results of it, and I think it lodged in my throat, actually. But the fact is that it really was a moving experience, and I wanted to thank everybody involved who got us there to deliver this message, and that was the message that I delivered in person to this group of researchers and people who have dedicated their lives to studying it.
And I also wanted to add my thoughts as as the one who was watching this. I realized as we were watching all these presentations, and there's so many different angles that people are focusing on, and there's clearly an awful lot of angles that are not really, they're not integrated in any way in many cases. They're completely separate worlds practically. And it reminded me of something that we became aware of because of our research into the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In 1979, when the Iranian students kidnapped the State Department people, the first thing that the State Department does in situations like that is shred all their documents before they have to leave and escape. Well, it turned out that the Iranian students pieced it back together. Apparently, they had not considered the kind of abilities people who have been, I think somebody said it's the rug weaving, probably
5,000 years of runway.
right, that gave them the ability of this very tiny alignment, perfectly aligning. So there's literally a population of people trained who could do this. And it turns out, now that book is of course, a lot of disparate things. You can't really completely use it, but it turned out that for our purposes, we were able to get a very important piece of very subtle evidence that supported some theories we were working with about the assassination of Ambassador Adolf Dubs in February 14, 1979, the Afghan ambassador, which was really what triggered the Soviet invasion. Was 9 months later. So you really have to pull back to that event. Just think of it as like the JFK, pulling back to an earlier event. Most people are focused on the Soviet invasion, but when you pull it back the 9 months, you get a much clearer idea of what's important and what's real. And it turned out that they're putting those documents together and then publishing it. We actually had a friend who was in Iran at that time, bought one of those books, brought it back for us. So here we have this amazing piece of very important evidence, and we were able to use it. Well, I feel a lot of the people in these research efforts in places like the Dallas Convention are in that state where they're literally putting shreds of evidence back together that has been completely shredded, and in many cases, destroyed. And what everything needs, though, is something that can overarch over it. And we were looking at the similarity of what happened with the Iranian students, because very few people looking at that book would have had the ability to pick that information out about such an important subject. That's the thing. You have to have some larger idea. And we hope that we have contributed an idea that is a larger structure that actually links motivations that go on in the modern area to motivations that happened 1,000 years ago, and makes sense out of them, and gives people a way to understand how the thinking from the 11th century and the 12th century, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th century is still with us today. And in many ways, I think Kris's point about the secret societies and their continuing use of the dark and the hidden and their power, because they come with very wealthy systems that are all very, much set up. And they really get a lot of influencers and a lot of people because of their wealth to keep a lot of information from easily getting out for people to understand things. And so we realized that this is something that needs to be kind of broken out into this larger structure. And we definitely recognized that when you get it down to a personal level, because it's not the first time that people have recognized that there were ritual events going on. Definitely, that has been understood. But without the personal story, going back into the personal history of the Fitzgerald family and their relationship to London over 400 years, leading to their complete destruction, you really can't always make that leap. And that's what we're trying to do. So we want to broaden people's minds to simply know that those are factors. And when we're dealing with people today who literally call themselves modern Knights Templars, you have to understand they actually mean it. And they really do believe that they live by a different set of rules, and they get to do a lot of things that they're never held accountable for, and that they are used to getting away with it for so long that they just don't understand when you say that's wrong. So that's part of what our job is is to get everyone in on that thinking. And I think that's what our presentation inaugurated.
Great.
I think that, you know, this was a very small group of people. And I think that, you know, today, I think the idea of a Knight Templar has come to represent a mindset.
Yeah.
And that is what Liz was talking about. And the mindset is basically, I get to do whatever I want because God has chosen me as his holy warrior.
Mhm.
And so that is shared. That's one of the things we realized about Afghanistan is that, which is so surprising, is the further we got into the story, the more we began to see connections to other things. This book that Craig Murray wrote a few years ago, who was the British ambassador to Tajikistan, I believe, or Kyrgyzstan. He basically wrote a book about Alexander Burns, who he was part of the first English invasion for the East India Company in the 1830s of Afghanistan, of Kabul. And he was very much interested in the origin of where these people had come from and their connection to the ancient mystical secrets of the Middle East, of Hermes Trismegistus and all of that. And he allegedly found some of the things that connected Afghanistan and these ancient secrets from Alexander the Great to Freemasonry. And he basically created a mythology surrounding it. And at that particular time, British Freemasonry was very much involved in the intelligence aspects of creating the empire, which had yet to reach its peak in the 1830s, and would eventually go into Afghanistan. They could go into Afghanistan, but they wouldn't control it. And it's funny, all these bits and pieces of data that you get as you go along. I remember watching The Man Who Would Be King, and they go to Kipling's office at the beginning of the movie, and the two ne'er-do-well explorers and men who would be king, and they go in and they say, and Rudyard Kipling says to them, "No, you're going to have to go through on the Afghan plain in order to get to Kafiristan, to the top of the mountain, where you want to be kings of." And I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute, they're going from India. They're not going from the other way. They're not going across Afghanistan. They're going across India and what is today Pakistan. And the more we got into the investigations on Afghanistan, I realized that what they were talking about was what Afghanistan had been prior to the British invasion in the 1830s and the 1840s. Afghanistan used to be everything on both sides of the Hindu Kush, all the way to the Indus River. So that entire Indus River society is one of the most ancient societies that's ever been found on Earth, and most sophisticated societies. And so from prehistory. And so here you have a situation where you have all of these tribes, you have this culture moving back and forth over the Hindu Kush into what today is Afghanistan, but which was at the time Afghanistan. And so, and also India, and it moved back and forth through a number of different empires over the centuries and the millennia. So you have this thing where you have this very elite group of guys who are in there looking at this situation and realizing that there's some very, very mystical connection in Afghanistan that relates to the way it is today and the way it was in the development of British Masonry. And so British Masonry was used by the elites and the intelligence service in order to forward the interests of the British Empire. And they did that by using a lot of these symbols and developing the symbols and the powers that were incorporated with those symbols. So, very much the world, and of course, the CIA was modeled along the East India Company's secret services of British India in the 1830s and 1840s. So you have a legacy, a very genuine legacy between British India and the CIA and as well as Masonry. So,
well, in fact, actually, many people around the world became Masons through that process. So, and we know that not all Masons are the same. If you're a third-degree Mason, it's a lot different than being a 33rd-degree Mason. And that's all part of what kind of keeps a kind of lid on a lot of the more serious adventures that these people get involved with. I think Kris's point about the secret societies and Skull and Bones and these kind of organizations where they're really very active, in ways that become less noticeable because there's a lot of normal people who become a part of these organizations and they don't necessarily know what's going on upstairs. So this is all part of, I think, the difficulty that we have, as the people. In fact, I think probably the best way to describe what our presentation was trying to point out is that the actual process of this ritual sacrifice that is basically laid out in our speech is really connected to actual ritual sacrifices that happened in 1100 and 1170. And when you actually look at the indicators of these sacrifices, they're almost identical to what happened to JFK. And the difference, though, and I think this is what's important, in 1100 and 1170, the people were aware of these things. They were not disconnected from them.
And that's an important
We
aspect
have
of this.
become completely disconnected, so we don't think it exists. And this is part of our struggle, is to convince these people that the reason we don't participate with them is not because we're unaware, it's because we don't feel it's the best way to participate in our lives together. And we have to convince them, that they have to give this up. It's like, it doesn't work anymore for the people of the earth, and it's got to stop.
Well, I think the digital world has also made it a lot worse, because the digital world basically comes in, packet switching, bits and pieces that have to be assembled, and they get assembled in any way you choose, or whoever wants to lead you chooses. But the fact is that analog history, and that history is analog, and that and so is time. And so when you're able to look at the beginning of an event and cause and effect, and start to bring it all together in order to make sense of it in terms of your consciousness, then I think that makes a big difference in terms of your understanding and your own personal connection to the past. And I've heard from my own relatives talking about their own kids growing up today, kids that are now teenagers and going off to school, that they really don't have they don't understand the importance of the JFK. They don't understand the importance of Franklin Roosevelt and World War II and why they happened and what the objective was and what the outcome was. They don't understand being connected to that. They feel literally like bits and bytes that have been taken out of a computer program and scattered all over the planet. They don't feel that kind of unity that we felt growing up here. They don't feel that kind of allegiance or that kind of sovereignty, personal sovereignty, the rights that we have as individuals and people in the United States that made us different from the other people that we would encounter in the world. So, we have to start rethinking, and we better start rethinking it very quickly, I'm afraid.
Well, I think that digital point, though, is really worth, I think, really making a very real understanding. When you look at a digital watch, you get one digit. When you look at an analog watch, you get a whole you get the universe, actually, because it never ends. It just keeps going around. And that, I think, is part of what we seem to have really transitioned so much into, a digital thinking. So and I think we have to understand that, and again, that's what we saw at the convention, was a lot of digital thinking. Everybody's in their own little part of this, and they can't come together and become a powerhouse. And that's part of what you have to do. You've got to figure out a way to bring some level of the conversation together. Well, we feel what we contributed could do that, but we need we need to keep working at it, because it really does, for some people it's really hard to believe it. They simply cannot believe that things that happened 1,000 years ago are actually being brought forth into the modern era, and they really should be left back 1,000 years
And
ago.
that there are people who are willing to bring those things
Yeah,
back
yeah, exactly,
and follow those.
exactly.
Good, thank you. Kris, any inspired reflections based on what Paul and Liz just said about the history of the JFK assassination, your experience a couple of weeks ago? Or is it
Well-
time to invite dialogue with everyone at this virtual roundtable?
Let's have some dialogue too, but basically, one thing is that, again, all Masons aren't responsible. All Catholics aren't responsible. All, everybody does their own individual thing. And so one thing we need to, be careful of is not creating another group to hate. Okay. Because again, this is about a table and having a discussion around a table and trying to figure out the best way to move forward. Now, I mean, who are we? We're just a bunch of people, but that's all the earth is a bunch of people, and ideas spark and go through. And so I don't know. I'm very, very hopeful because again, the personal computer and the internet are changing the world, and we haven't seen all the changes that they have brought about. And the other thing I'd like to say is Amos 5:24, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never falling stream, because all of us together are much more powerful than quote unquote, they are, whoever they are.
Well, thanks. And the invitation to this event, yes, Liz?
Yeah, no, I was just going to affirm what Kris just said about, we have to come together. I want to reaffirm that point I just made, and Kris reiterated that the key here is that we have to figure out how we can focus, and I think that's our whole point.
We're doing
about,
it.
Huh?
We're doing it.
I know,
focusing.
but I know, but it's a
discussion does.
Right, there's a practical level at which, and that was my point about the convention, where you have people who are together but not sharing in at the level. We have to figure out how we can share the right things together so that we can move out with this. And again, this is why I brought up the key of our total plan. And I always like to bring this back because we can get very focused on the level of our discussion here about the JFK assassination. But what we are ultimately talking about is the economics of justice, and creating getting the ideas out that will help people to create the economic justice we need, because at a practical level, everybody fundamentally needs that first in order to contribute in any other way. That becomes a foundational idea that needs to happen first. And then we can move into the world peace plan. And that's where JFK's dream, bringing that back and reiterating the fact that that is the way to really, I think, break the psychosis of the assassination fixation, is to remind people of the other part of his life that has to be brought back.
Kris, I wanted to show you something that, that I came across going through my old files. And it's something that I've had since 1969. This is
What is it?
Yeah.
De Millay. These are all my friends. These are the kids I went to high school with and grammar school with, and that was the society I graduated with when I was not De Millay, needless to say, but I didn't even understand at the time what De Millay was all about. But here I am.
De Millay was about meeting girls.
Well, the
is what-
dances. What about? I used to go to the dances,
Yeah.
at the Catholic school, and I wasn't Catholic.
This is the De Millay sweetheart, and She was a very nice girl. I had my high school picture in Glee Club taken right next to her. So
And for people who have no idea who de Molay was,
de Molay was Jacques de Molay. This is a society that was named after Jacques de Molay. Jacques de Molay was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, who was burnt at the stake in 1314. Correct? Yeah.
They're basically a Masonic boys club.
Yeah.
And you know, I did talk to several people at the conference about Henry George. Most of them had never ever heard of him. Okay, had a very good conversation with Dick Russell, and he said he was going to look into it quite deeply. And so, you know, again, you know, I come from Oregon, the 33rd state, and you know, we've got Nike here, and what does he say? He says, "Do it." Okay, and that's, you know, we don't need to you know, figure it out. We need to just do it.
and in that spirit, I will propose that everybody unmute and everybody consider ourselves equals here. And if we listen real carefully when someone wants to interject, to have no rules for how the rest of this roundtable will go. So anyone who's got anything to say or ask about anything, we're all listening. I'm listening.
I'm going to by the Bruce. We want to make sure the speech gets into the chat. So
It was there when you started talking.
it was. I didn't see it. Oh, okay.
Well, in this lovely silence, I will ask any of our panelists to give a little recap for anyone who's hearing. This is their first participation in one of our roundtables. A very, very brief, succinct recap of the things we advertised to this roundtable, JFK's vision for peace, and how the economics of Henry George can help us create it.
Alana may want to speak to this, but I do have a thought of why we've had such a difficult time getting people to think deeply about our history and how our societies are organized. And colleagues of Alana and mine wrote a book in 1994 that was titled The Corruption of Economics. And this book is central to understanding what happened, because when Henry George was writing in the late 1800s, his science was called political economy, and that was interdisciplinary. But those who were coming up younger, and for various reasons, they divided political economy into 7 or 8 different sub-disciplines. So we ended up with professions of professors doing research and writing in political science, in sociology, in cultural anthropology, and in economics, and in law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of taking a look at how human society evolved as an integrated analysis, something that people like Adam Smith undertook, and eventually Henry George in his own way, we have this problem of being disassociated with knowledge. And so only by changing that, which some of us have done our best to do through the Henry George Schools work and other teaching opportunities, I don't know what we can do to reach the mass of people who are not, they do not have access to integrated knowledge, and they are apathetic about that access. And the young people have the, added challenge of growing up in a very electronic oriented world with impatience about learning, kind of learning that's required to write a long book, for example. They're looking for instantaneous knowledge, instantaneous gratification, and that's not what understanding our human evolution requires.
A big reason for that is the education system. Okay, and that was one of the first things that Skull and Bones did, was to take over the education system that had been developed, from school marms and industrial things, and brought over the Prussian education system, which instead of teaching us how to think, tries to teach us what to think. And, you know, we the baby boomers were kind of on a cusp between the old education and the modern education. So some of us, you know, some of us actually got civics classes, you know, some of us didn't, you know, so it has been through the control of American education to dumb down American people. It's a sad fact.
Yeah.
I told Bruce when when Bruce interviewed me a while ago, I told him that I got my civics education in high school through a really amazing teacher. And the first book I ever received as a gift came from him, and it was Thomas Paine's book, Rights of Man.
Amen.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's what the 50s, certainly I remember that was all about individual teachers who were just really special. And you could have that, and they could impart something and inspire and cause great things to happen for, especially for kids that might not be able to have much access outside of school. A lot of kids, families, that they didn't have big incomes. These were when only dad worked, and it might be a working class situation. And when I think that. But what we've come into, and I think this was the point I was trying to make earlier about the digital thinking. It is as if, Kris, what they've accomplished is completely compartmentalizing people's thinking. They don't actually see, except, it's an upward look, who's above me, and that's who I have to respond to. So there's very little cross-lateral thinking, and that's what we need to activate.
It's
that.
also coming from the top down. I mean, when we did our documentary on Afghanistan after our first visit in 1981 and presented it at the Parker House before an audience of local news media and international. We had the New York Times people there. We had other people that were influential in the Boston Globe. And so Ted Elliott was also there. Ted Elliott had been the ambassador to Afghanistan from the United States. He was at that moment the dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, which trains American diplomats. And this would have been in 1981. And he was also, as it turned out, the chief secretary for the Bilderberg Organization for the United States. So after the first cut of our documentary aired, I went to the podium and started answering questions from all the people that were there, because nobody had been in there since the Soviets invaded. It was a big black hole that nobody even knew anything about. And so Ted Elliott started standing up and answering the questions on my behalf, which I thought was a little rude, at least rude. And so at any rate, by the third question, I said, "Look, Dean," he says to me, he turned to me, I said, it was my experience. And he said, "Who gave you permission to tell this story?" Well,
this
the
is
entire
1981.
The entire room, it issued a collective gasp. Here's the head of a law school, the dean of a law school, basically saying, I said, "Dean, I don't need permission to tell this story. I'm an American citizen. There is no embargo. There's no prohibition from going to Afghanistan." In fact, at the time, it actually still was on the most favored nations list because of trade. The U.S. government hadn't gotten around to taking it off the most favored nations trade list. So at any rate, I said, what is this all about? And that's when he pointed his finger at me and he said, "You're treading very closely to being a conduit for Soviet propaganda." So he let it all out right there and then. And the fact is that eventually we did come to see that we were on the same team. We really did enjoy our time in Afghanistan. We really did want the best for the Afghan people. And he was convinced that once we invaded there, that everything was going to be great. It was all going to be hunky-dory. It was all going to work. And of course, it didn't work any better than it had worked for the Soviets. But the fact is that I got the message clear and simple that night at the Parker House in 1981. you don't do certain things, and you're crossing a line here. And if you cross that line, you're going to be in big trouble.
But now we can see that the lines are everywhere that can't be crossed. That's part of what's happening.
Yeah.
Any reflections or comments or questions from those who are not Trine Day panelists?
Why not? Why not?
Yes, I'm Marty.
Hi, am I unmuted? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I met JFK when I was very young in school at the Capitol. He wasn't president yet, but I had this feeling, you know, I knew he was going to be president. I felt like he had this Camelot energy. And I was wondering, Liz, if we've invited in Richard here, Schulman, who has done this CD. I don't know if you can see it on Camelot Reawakened, but remember how you described how the Fitzgeralds going back when there was some connection between Camelot, knowing the Camelot?
Oh, yeah.
You could.
You want to tell that story?
You tell it.
The origin of the Fitzgerald family.
Liz, you're unusually muted suddenly.
I can't hear.
You're muffly.
Oh, okay. I'll turn up the volume.
Something really changed.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah, you
Nothing.
too.
oh.
We've been hacked.
Oh, we haven't done. Is it still not good?
You're like at 30% volume as you used to be earlier 10 minutes ago.
That's
Okay.
not going to make any
That
difference.
won't make
That's
any
the
difference.
volume.
I know. Well, okay.
Well, we'll listen carefully.
Okay. The origin of the Fitzgerald family goes back to the 11th century when Gerald of Windsor was, it was actually William Rufus, who he basically King William Rufus, who he worked for, put together the couple of Princess Nest and Gerald of Windsor. And that became the foundation of the Fitzgerald family. Well, it turns out that Princess Nest was part of the Welsh lineage going back to King Arthur. And that there are those who, can you get back?
No, please.
There are those who are, who realize that these stories that are considered myths, in fact, have a lot of true history behind them. And that's part of what we've tried to do with the Fitzgerald story, is look into the mythology that actually was created as they lived and begin to understand how myths are created. So when you go back to the origin of Princess Nest, you're really looking at the connection to what became the origin story for the Camelot story, which is the Grail quest, which is King Arthur and the Round Table and all of that. So can we go back?
I'm trying to get the
I
sound.
know it's hard to speak.
Is the sound still the same?
It's better. I turned my volume up. I'm fine if everyone else is fine. And well, continue, Paul and Liz, but I definitely want to ask Richard to describe his book and his thoughts about Camelot, JFK's vision for peace, etc., whenever appropriate.
If you'd like.
Or Paul, I'm just intrigued by the title of your book there.
It's a
chat.
CD.
It's a CD. Okay, very good. Okay.
Yeah. Richard, talk.
Hi. It's a symphonic work.
Oh, wonderful. When did it come out?
In the 90s, I was kind of on my own quest about Camelot. And I do things called musical soul portraits, where I will sit, tune in, ask for music for the highest good for a person or a group. And I was just going along doing soul portraits. And I was in, I think it's Crestone, Arizona, Crestone, Colorado, giving a soul portrait to a medical doctor, a woman. And as I went into meditation to receive the music, I saw a sword descend from heaven.
Wow, that's it.
And I interrupted myself. And I said to the client, "Did you see what I saw?" And she said, "I have one word for you: Camelot."
Wow.
So on one level, Camelot Reawakened is about manifesting what we would like to manifest based on our heart's desire, the heart that is connected with everyone else, and the heart that is showing us what our mission is. And then I found over the course of several years, took 5 years to write the thing. And then there was a musical I wrote after that. So I would do these soul portraits and I would sense a Camelot energy with many of them. And I would ask permission, could I use their melody, which was given to me in the Camelot vibration. And so I compiled a list of melodies and I put the jigsaw puzzle together because I'm a composer.
Richard, I feel like asking you because I'm intrigued and I really love the way listening to you has made me feel. And I'm studying how you just spoke and your pacing. Is it because you are a ninja listener, that you're listening at a level that we'd have to meet, a Zen Buddhist after 40 years of meditation? I'm just so intrigued at your speech pattern. Has anyone ever asked you about it? Is this the first time anyone said, I'm absolutely like, I listened with great tenderness because your pausing made me think that your train of thought was either very, very special and you're really trying to find the precise word for the precise thought. So I wanted to listen with great fragility. Is this making any sense?
Perfect.
How? How so? How was that perfect? I'm not even sure what I asked.
Okay, well, first of all, there's a great emotional power and as well as actual spiritual power that I resonate with, and I'm very sensitive. So it's not only that I recognize, but I recognize resonances in who I'm talking with. And when those resonances happen, it's not just a mental speaking. It's that, and I have to wait until the emotional wave passes through so that then I can get to the expressing the reality that wants to be shared.
Thank you.
A composer from Asheville, North Carolina. I love Asheville. It's a great little town. And I'd like to read the track listings because I think they're relevant here.
Kris, if I could just leave Richard a personal thought in response to what you just shared, Richard, about the emotional component to your listening. I was an actor for many, many years, and I struggled to get control over it, over what I did on stage. And when I was in my early 30s, I was advised to let my performance come out of what my scene partner was doing right there in the moment. And I thought, oh, that makes sense. I can do that because I've really been studying this through experience, auditions and performing and auditions and performing. And we went out on stage that night and I paid attention like I'd never paid attention before. And what I experienced with my scene partner was nothing less than love. It was a love of, because of the level of attention that I was giving her.
Mhm.
And it changed my life because I realized it was magical. It was absolutely magical. The effect I had on the audience was devastating because I'd never been so interested in what someone else was doing on stage. So it felt like the whole audience had never been so interested in whatever I was doing on stage. And here's the bottom line. It changed my life because I realized in life, I didn't listen to people as if they were worth listening to. And I wanted to find that same love and connection. And with that kind of listening, I realized when I pay attention like that, what exists is love. If I'm not in a hurry, or I'm not selfish, or I'm not impatient, or I'm not judging them as, well, they're useless for my purposes and goals, I'm going to move on. So that's what all this conversation about listening has been for me, Richard and Kris and everybody. Thank you.
No,
You're
That's
welcome.
absolutely.
That's beautiful.
And again, I want to list the track listings on his Camelot Reawaken. It starts off with a dream, a royal procession, a celebration, releasing the past, healing, remembering the love that we are, prayer. For those who have returned from the center of the labyrinth, integration and empowerment, the dream fulfilled.
And it's perfect number. Yes. I've actually watched the whole show and it's wonderful. It's absolutely,
We both did, yeah.
yeah.
And
Well-
where can one obtain this CD?
Well, the actual CD is basically out of stock. What is available is a DVD that you can get at my website, richheartmusic.com.
Say it again.
richheartmusic.com. RICHEARTMUSIC.com.
I put it in the chat.
And by the way, Bruce, I can't see in the chat the website logo.
You move it up and down. It has a thing on the
Scroll
side.
all the way to the top. It should be the first entry in the
Yeah,
chat.
no,
Barbara,
we've got Barbara Honecker as the first one. I'm just letting you know. I don't know why. Maybe something's happening with our computer.
Well, I'll repaste it. I'll repaste it.
Anyway, no, I think that in our connection, I think, Richard, to you, was definitely not only the Camelot, but also the work with dreams and the integration and the allowance of bringing that in as an active quality in your life that is part of a natural back and forth between obviously the practical reality that we all have to live at and this other dimension that needs to be very naturally brought in as an ally and a friend, and an active ally and a friend, and a conscious ally and a friend. So I definitely appreciated, we've been on that path now for quite a few decades too. So.
Just
Yeah.
good. You.
Well, it really is about love,
Oh, yeah, well,
about following spirit.
but there's a level at which you bring in, it's the it's the act itself though that has this different quality when you engage this dimension with your choices, I feel. And when you notice it, when you actually notice it coming, like, you know, this is part of what we've been working with, as I mentioned originally, when we had our daughter's dream in 1991 that really set us on this exact course to end up in Dallas 2 weeks ago to deliver what we delivered. Okay. And what we saw over the 30 years, though, was really amazing in the subtle hints we were getting all along the way in the form of other dreams and synchronicities and people crossing our paths that were, you know, just, you know, an amazing, you know, connection that seems to appear. And as you begin to recognize the signs sometimes are very subtle and they may be easy to dismiss or miss. And I'm sure we do that all the time in any event. We don't always get the message. And that's part of I think there's an awful lot of missed attempts because so many people are tuned out. So many people are not really keeping that channel alive. And I think that's all part of this effort that we've had to try to get people to focus not just on the assassination of JFK, but the resurrection of JFK's dream of world peace, because that's what gives you the balance. And, you know, the other part of it is too, that what we really presented at Dallas was, I think we hope, helping people understand that JFK really wasn't just assassinated in that moment. He became a martyr in that moment. And I think that's the most important understanding to realize it's not just about dying. It's about how you
colonization or sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, we've got Ed and then Dean put things in the chat earlier, and now Alana has raised her hand. So as a professional moderator, I'll ask Ed Dodson, you want to repeat and expand a little and address your comment in the chat, Ed Dodson, or what?
I just repeat, I think we remain tribal. Human beings live in tribes. Progress has meant that we've accepted people with diversity into our tribe, but we're still aligned tribally. And so we see that in the world today, I think everywhere. And there are some people who have, even though they don't live geographically in the same nation state or the same area community, have managed to adopt transnational values. And so we have this global sharing of certain values, but we're still a long way with any agreement on what values constitute justice. And I think that's our struggle.
And in the name of justice, I want to summarize a little bit of what you just said and then move on to definitely hear from those next in line. Our tribal instinct, as it were, is used against us. That is how I feel we are divided and conquered. And we really, really have to transcend that according to, I believe, the sentiments that you just expressed and also your note in the chat. Thank you, Ed. Dean, you wrote the control. Hi, Dean. The control. Do you want to unmute and talk about it, or do you want me to read it?
I'm just going to expand on it. People can read it if they want. But I think it kind of goes to what Ed was just saying about, yes, we are tribal. That's very, very much part of human history and I think human future. But the way in which the digital presentation of what's going on, little packets of information basically used as what I consider to be fear porn to manipulate people so that one tribe is easily turned against another tribe and creates another fear porn adventure, which is what I think is going on right now in the Middle East. Again, I mean, it's not like it's ever stopped. It's just sometimes the flame gets turned up a heck of a lot higher. And I feel like the important thing that we have to consider is what are we doing with the knowledge and information that we have that enables us to have like the analog view? Where did this all come from? What is the potential that's there to move out of this swirl, this storm, so that we can actually have the resurrection, so the understanding of what it is that's happening. Why are these things happening? How are they being used to either manipulate and control, or how do we take our perception of it to a higher level, that we have a narrative that we start to promote, that, you know, as Liz has often said, we begin to end this cycle of revenge and retribution, you know, the use of tribalism, so that we're forever having people disconnect instead of connect.
And Liz and Paul, I'll go to you with, you know, how would you answer that from a JFK perspective, this being an exploration of his vision for peace?
I think that is the exact point about understanding that we are all participating. And I think the idea of the word tribalism, I think, really has been given a bum rap. I think the idea that we're tribal is not bad. I think the idea that we become comfortable and used to things and patterns is not bad, okay? And that it's not the cause of, you know, of people coming together and fighting each other. It's not inherently doing that, okay? But I do believe that, I think what you said about that there are people taking advantage, and I think Kris made a very important point about the whole educational system has helped set us up to have less conscious tools. So we have to, but once you're conscious of it, I think that's the whole key. Once you get onto it and you realize, okay, some disadvantages have come my way, but I'm not going to let them rule me. And I'm going to do the best I can to make sure that I don't fall into that, again, what Dean just said about the revenge and retribution pattern, which is, I think, right now, the key to understanding the JFK assassination and its justification is, it is literally the justification of the revenge and retribution pattern itself. And what's going on right now in Israel is also part of that pattern. So we know that these are things that we have to become conscious of, and it's not something you can just dismantle in yourself. We've got a lot of trapdoors in ourselves, and I like to call, you know, rabbit holes. Like, you know, you suddenly, a person you thought you knew, something happens that never happened before, and all of a sudden they act in a way you've never seen before. Don't be afraid of it. Try to realize that these patterns have to break down, and part of breaking down the patterns is going to mean they have to come out, and people have to become observant of themselves and of them, and other people have to become conscious of it. So in the case of JFK, I think when you look at his life, what he tried to do, okay, it's pretty obvious he knew what he was after, and he was very clear about it. He had absolutely no hesitation to confront the entire apparatus of the government with his desire to promote world peace. That's simply a fact. And it was obvious that he was not afraid that it might put him in harm's way. I mean, whatever he actually thought about it, but that was not the top on his mind. I mean, do you think that's what Gandhi was thinking before he was killed?
You just articulated something so powerful, which is first, know what you want. Now, we could even replace Woody Allen's famous advice, 90% of success is just showing up. Okay, if that's true, then the next 10% is, what do you want? And if we know, Dean, that we want peace, and Liz, what you just added, like, even if someone shocks you with something you've never seen before, have some patience, treat it kindly, and work with it, especially if you care about the quality of the moment, let alone the quality of the relationship, so it could endure. Is it okay to swing it to Alana? See what you took your hand down, Alana. What's going on?
Well, it's you acknowledge me. I don't need to keep it up. First, thank you, everybody. This has been very rich as usual, and super rich, I think, as a conversation. And it's great to hear that things went well in Dallas, Paul and Liz. I'm going to trace through a few points in the conversation that I've been taking a few notes. One, I just want to acknowledge that everyone here is a person of high aspiration, of goodwill, of love, that really wants sincerely to do our part in creating a better world. People often with high aspirations who are not clear about their sole mission and that 10% Bruce that says, what are we going to do now and what's the action plan? If that clarity is not there, though, there can be frustration and depression. So the importance of moving from brilliant, great ideas and aspirations to real work in the world the way it is. We mentioned the love, it's all about love. And in the planet the way it is, most people are not experiencing love. We're not that evolved yet. Some of us may be full of love, but many are not. The lowest common denominator of love is justice. If we can't love each other, the lowest possible act is to be fair to each other, because being fair to you means hopefully you're going to be fair to me. It's a kind of a self-interest love is justice. So justice is really key in defining what that means on Earth right now. There was the reflection on, and who said this, what chance do we have as a people in democracy? Paul was talking about when you can assassinate a president in full view. What chance do the people of a democracy have? So to look at that, the chances there when we, the people, have clarity and unity of purpose. And I want to mention 4 words that came out of our New View conversation now on Rumble. A group of us published under New View, and Liz is involved with that group as well. And we recently talked with Joachim Hagopian, who's gone down many, many, many dark holes into the pits of the most terrible things happening on Earth. Probably more than anyone I know, he's seeing the evil, the lack of alignment with truth. And he mentioned what to do. We said, what do we do? Solutions. So there's 4 words we've come up with is unify, demystify, mobilize, and decentralize. We could have a whole big session on that. But clearly we can't keep supporting a government like ours that's doing terrible things with our energy, meaning our taxation dollars. As a young woman on a spiritual path, I never would have thought I would be interested in the field of taxation. But when I came across Henry George's work, it all made sense to me. And that's been my life devotion. Kris mentioned you talked to people in Dallas. Nobody heard of Henry George. Just tell them, I mean, they should know that 10 days ago, we had a very, very, very extensive article in the New York Times. And because as de rigueur, you've got to trash Henry George as a cult, it still had much accurate information about the policy of land value taxation in healing many of our major urban problems. Poverty, homelessness, lack of money for infrastructure, and so on. So we are getting out there. This was a great, great deal to people in the Henry George movement that the New York Times had this article. So I encourage you all to read that. Then shortly thereafter, we found out that the top city, strangely enough, for retirement is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which was the 2nd worst distressed city in the United States in the late 70s, started having a land value tax shift with their local property tax, and now it's declared the best retirement city, as was Allentown, another of our land value tax cities, the 3rd largest city in Pennsylvania. Who'd have thunk, that a city could go that far, that fast? Before I finish, Kris has his hand raised. Do I allow Kris to interrupt me or not?
A question. How did homelessness affect in those cities? Did homelessness go down?
Oh my, homelessness, arson, which is boarded up. You have a city of 50,000 in Harrisburg, small city, but our state capital. You had 4,000 boarded up buildings. suddenly, hey, you're not going to be an absentee landowner with boarded up buildings. You better fix up those properties or sell it to somebody who's willing to work and organize labor and capital. So now that's why they're moving there. It's affordable housing. It's like $100,000 less for a house than in many other cities. It's other cities its size. So yes, and many positive things. I have an article called Pennsylvania's Success with Local Tax Reform. Of anything I've ever written, it's been read by more people than any. So you can get to that. Now, mention was also made about that shifting of the boundaries between India and Afghanistan. Remember that part of our conversation? Mm-hmm. And that high culture of the Indus River Valley. So I came across a book on Vedic economics. Thousands of years ago, Indus River Valley was a high civilization, harmonic, even gender balance, if you can believe, in terms of male-female leadership. And they had what is thought to be a fairly modern public finance approach. They had a land value tax policy. And I had done a PowerPoint a number of months ago on the roundtable called Sacred Rule Economics. And we traced this perennial wisdom teaching around fundamental economic justice in relation of the human to the earth itself, in relation to proper constituted public finance. So I went through worldwide, different cultures, different places. When they had this type of approach, there were harmonic societies. When they lost the clue to the perennial wisdom teachings, you saw the downward spiral of the culture. So now I wanted to just make the announcement about our work with this upcoming March Equinox Earth Day celebration. We're bringing forward the economics of the founder of the original Earth Day, which is the equinox, where the peace bell has been rung at the United Nations for more than 40 years at the exact moment of equinox. The founder, John McConnell, his economics of peace, Earth rights, is the Georgist Henry George economics. And Henry George simply rediscovered, uncovered through his own reasoning and thought process while he was trying to understand the growing wealth inequality problem. He simply rediscovered this ancient wisdom teaching around economic justice. So the founder of the original Earth Day, John McConnell, had this as his economics of peace, but it's never been brought out on that Equinox Earth Day. We're bringing it forward now. So we have an ad hoc group. The first step, and I think last time I mentioned this, we had Dean Goodman said he would sign simple, like he endorses the mission statement, which I went over last time. It's a simple first step. Endorse the Equinox Earth Day mission. The second is have some kind of little event. If it's a dinner party, or as we're organizing at the Henry George School in New York, a full day seminar. So the idea is to get people starting to have this tempo, this rhythm of every year at this time, we honor the earth rights. We start putting in place the economics of peace. And out of those little events that people organize, they can expand to actual active implementation policy projects for the land value tax shift that's so successful. And we have now the whole template to assist people in going into becoming activists to have this fundamental tax reform. So that's where we're headed with that. And there's a lot of cohesion now between what Paul and Liz are doing in the JFK peace speech and the roundtables and the Equinox Earth Day. And that's what it's going to take to unify, to get people out of that divide and conquer place they like to put us in, and to go beyond the old right and the old left. So welcome all of you. What will it take to get more people to endorse our Equinox Earth Day mission statement? You tell me.
Where is that sign up for the Dean Goodman thing? What was that you were talking about?
Alana?
Alana
I
looks.
don't know, Dean Goodman. We're talking about signing up for the endorsement for the Equinox Earth Day mission statement.
Where is that?
And Dean, the last time I spoke about it, I said, please, I think I read it through last roundtable. And then I
Can you
said,
put the
please
link in
put
the
in
chat?
chat. I said,
Yeah.
please put it in chat if you want to endorse it. And can I
Right.
put a link in chat? It's not posted online yet.
Ah.
I have to email it to everybody. It should be posted within a week.
Okay.
I have another document posted. I can find that link though.
I think
So I'll
what
do that.
you
Thank you.
offered- Yeah, I think what you offered, Alana, was if people would put their name in and say, I endorse this, then you would just add it. And once it's ready to be emailed, your name will already be on it. That's the idea.
Well, there's the sheet that lists everybody's endorsements from around the world.
Mhm.
But then the invitation to endorse is a one-page document on the mission statement. That's what they're endorsing, that one page.
Right.
That's not yet posted, but we have
Right.
that longer page, 2 pages, which describes this in more detail. I'll try to find it right now, post it in chat.
Well, by the way, where will it be posted?
It will be posted on the iu.org under projects. There's already the
THEIU. Mm-hmm.
That's the International Union for Land Value Taxation. The
Okay.
iu.org/projects is under there.
Okay.
And we may have another website, Earth Society Foundation. We'll be using maybe that one, or we'll start another website. For now, we're posting the documents on the iu.org.
And believe it or not, it's time for me to canvass Paul and Liz and then Kris for final thoughts and farewells. Paul and Liz.
Well, I think what Alana just set up for everyone here, I think is a great way to round this up, because this is an action moment. The event that Alana was talking about is going to be March, it's 19th, right, Alana?
Yes.
Right, March 19th, the next spring equinox. It's going to be at, its focus is the United Nations, but the idea is to spread all the knowledge about what the original Earth Day was really about, was economic justice. It was about creating the economy of peace that could create world peace. And it was co-opted. It was turned into something else, which was celebrated on April 22nd. We are trying to bring back the original power and help people understand how to activate it. So this is a real action moment. And I hope, Richard, I don't know how active you are musically at this moment, but if you have any desire to know more about this, we are definitely looking for the kind of inspiration that you put into your Camelot symphony. So that would be fantastic, to hear about.
I'd like
Paul?
to include his symphony listed in our resource guide now for the Equinox Earth Day events.
Right.
I'll put it
Ah.
in.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Paul?
I want to thank everybody for showing up today. How's the volume? Is it all right?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're on the cusp of a whole new way of living. And I'm not fearful of where we're going. I think I've been very frustrated with the way things have developed over the last 35, 40 years. And the more you know, the more I became disturbed by it. But at this point, I mean, after going to Dallas and seeing it and understanding and meeting with all the other people that are there and being able to communicate ideas that they had never thought about before, and just being able to appreciate the research that they put into the stuff that we've been involved with and joining our efforts together, I think it really made me feel positive about where we're headed. And I think we really can make a difference, and we can do it, and it's going to be happening. It's already happening. It's unveiling itself. So that's my final say.
And before I throw it to Kris, I want to invite everyone on the Zoom to open up the chat column and save it. And the way you do that is when the meeting chat is open, you look at the very bottom of the white column, there are about 4 gray icons and then 3 dots. Click the 3 dots. It says in blue, save chat. Click save chat. Then when the Zoom is over and you exit the Zoom, your computer should open a folder that just has this file, the meeting chat, saved in it. So it'll have the record of everything that people contributed into the chat. So at the very bottom, 3 dots, hit save chat. Oh, look, in the chat, I put a link to a YouTube video I made, a 5-minute thing called JFK Will Not Go Away 2023 version. And all you people on Facebook, go check that out at my channel, Bruce the Taurus. JFK Will Not Go Away 2023 version, less than 5 minutes. Hopefully inspiring along the lines of this awesome roundtable. And now our host, Kris Millegan.
Golly Wally Doodle. You know, it is very nice to see and hear all that has happened in this roundtable. And, you know, what happens at this roundtable is open to the world. Anybody can, you know, click on it and watch it anytime. It can, you know, like they say, a butterfly, you know, flapping one place of the world affects other things. And so, you know, we need to, again, remember that, you know, what are we doing here, you know, and to me, we're trying to create a better world for our children and for their children, because, you know, we are this beautiful blue planet, you know, flying around the universe with us running around on it, doing things. And, you know, as many people have told us, you know, it's how you treat your brother and sister and how you treat your Mother Earth. So onwards to a better future. Amen.